The lights inside the massive auditorium of America's Got Talent glowed softly as the audience settled into their seats. There was the usual buzz, excited whispers, nervous laughter, the rustling of programs. Everyone was waiting for the next act, expecting something impressive, maybe even shocking. But no one was prepared for what was about to walk onto that stage. Backstage, a young Filipino man stood quietly, eyes closed, hands clasped together as if in prayer. His name was Miguel Santos, a 24-year-old from a small fishing village in Cebu. He wasn't dressed like a superstar. No flashy jacket, no designer boots. Just simple black pants, polished but slightly worn shoes, and a neatly pressed white shirt his mother had carefully folded into a suitcase before he left home. This was his first time in America. When the stage manager gave him the signal, Miguel inhaled deeply. His heart pounded so loudly, he was certain the microphones would pick it up. He whispered to himself in Tagalog, "Para sa pamilya." For my family. The curtains parted. A single spotlight followed him as he walked toward the giant AGT logo glowing behind the judges' table. The crowd clapped politely, not wildly, not enthusiastically, just enough to be respectful. From a distance, he looked like just another hopeful dreamer, chasing an impossible dream. At the judges' table sat familiar faces, including Simon Cowell, leaning back in his chair with a neutral expression. Simon had seen thousands of contestants over the years, singers especially. For every great one, there were dozens who believed talent alone could carry them without preparation. He folded his arms, watching closely. Miguel reached the center mark on the stage. The microphone stand felt cold under his fingers. The theater suddenly seemed enormous. He could barely see past the bright lights, but he felt the presence of thousands staring at him. The host smiled warmly. "What's your name and where are you from?" "My name is Miguel Santos," he replied, his accent gentle but clear. "I'm from the Philippines." The audience applauded louder at that. There was something about an international contestant that always sparked curiosity. One of the judges asked what he did for a living. "I help my father with fishing," Miguel said softly. "And I sing at small community gatherings, sometimes weddings." A few people in the crowd smiled. It sounded sweet but not extraordinary. Simon leaned forward slightly. "And why did you come all this way to compete?" Miguel swallowed. "Because music saved me. And I want to show that even someone from a small village can carry a big dream." It was a good answer, honest. But AGT had heard good answers before. Simon tilted his head. "And what will you be singing today?" Miguel hesitated just long enough for the tension to grow. "I will sing a song by Elvis Presley." A ripple moved through the audience. "Elvis? Really?" Some people shifted in their seats. Covering Elvis was dangerous territory. His voice was iconic, untouchable. Many had tried. Few had succeeded. The risk of sounding like an imitation or worse, a karaoke act, was high. Simon's eyebrow lifted slightly. Of all songs to choose, Miguel had chosen one associated with one of the most legendary performers in history. It was bold, maybe too bold. "All right," Simon said calmly. "Let's hear it." The band prepared. The stage lights dimmed to a deep blue, casting a soft halo around Miguel. For a brief second, complete silence filled the theater. Miguel closed his eyes. Back in Cebu, his mother was likely awake despite the time difference, sitting near the family's small television with neighbors crowded around. His father, who rarely showed emotion, had probably stepped outside to pretend he wasn't nervous. The first instrumental note floated through the speakers. Miguel gripped the microphone. Inside, fear battled with something stronger, a memory. He remembered being 10 years old, sitting beside an old radio as his father played classic songs. Elvis had been his favorite, not because of fame, not because of the fame or the suits or the screaming crowds, but because of the feeling in the voice, the soul. He opened his mouth. The first note came out low, steady, controlled, but there was something else in it. Depth, warmth, a tone that didn't sound forced or imitated. It sounded lived in. The audience stopped shifting. Conversations died instantly. The note carried across the auditorium like a wave, smooth and resonant. It didn't feel like a young man trying to copy Elvis. It felt like someone channeling the emotion behind the music. Simon's posture changed. He uncrossed his arms. Miguel moved into the next line, his voice rising slightly, revealing a rich baritone that seemed far too powerful for his slim frame. The vibrato was natural, not exaggerated. Each word was pronounced with care, as though he understood not just the lyrics, but the heart behind them. A murmur spread through the crowd. People leaned forward, The camera cut to the judges. One of them blinked in surprise. Another slowly smiled. But Simon stared intensely, studying every detail. His experience told him when something was ordinary and when something was rare. Miguel's confidence grew with each lyric. His shoulders relaxed. The tremble in his hands disappeared. The stage that once felt enormous now felt intimate, almost sacred. When he reached the pre-chorus, he allowed a slight crack of emotion into his voice, not a mistake, but a choice. It added vulnerability, humanity. It wasn't perfect in a technical sense. It was better. By the time he hit the chorus, the sound filled every corner of the auditorium. It was powerful without shouting, controlled without being rigid. The tone had a haunting resemblance to Elvis Presley, yet it remained uniquely his own. A woman in the audience covered her mouth. A man in the front row whispered, "Wow." Simon leaned forward now, elbows on the desk. His expression had shifted from skepticism to disbelief. He wasn't smiling, not yet. He was analyzing, searching for flaws, waiting for the moment where the performance might collapse. It didn't. Instead, Miguel softened the next line, pulling the audience in closer. The dynamics were intentional. He understood pacing. He understood restraint. This wasn't luck. This was instinct. And then something extraordinary happened. The crowd, once cautious, began to clap gently in rhythm. Not because they were told to, because they felt it. Miguel's eyes opened briefly, and he saw it thousands of strangers connected to his voice. The fear vanished completely. In its place came gratitude. This wasn't just an audition anymore. It was a moment. As he approached the end of the song's first section, his voice soared into a sustained note, rich, emotional, echoing with the kind of depth that usually comes from decades of life experience. It rang out, steady and unwavering. The theater fell silent again as the note faded. And in that silence, you could almost feel it. Something special had just begun. Simon slowly shook his head, not in disappointment but in stunned recognition. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. This was no ordinary audition. This was the entrance of a voice that carried history, soul, and a dream that had traveled thousands of miles, and it had just taken its first powerful step onto the biggest stage in the world.